Raise your hand if you're eliminated. Yes, yes, yes. Welcome to Answers with Guests. This is season 7. We're coming close to the end. This is week 13.5, halftime adjustments, Answers with Guests. We are Fantasy Football's inside scoop from outside the box. Like and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Patreon. And thanks, Rob. We are podcasting on Spotify. Be sure to use those hashtags, Answers Podcast, hashtag ABGFF, and hashtag ABG3P. That is our weekend show. Don't forget, we got merch in the Facebook group, $25 ship for a t-shirt, $45 ship for a hoodie. Heading into week 14, 6 leagues. I have a glimmer, slim glimmer of hope in one, but 6 and 7 isn't going to cut it pretty much everywhere. And it has been a roller coaster of a season. It happens to, I'm not exactly that, but it happens to the best of us. So if it is you, that is okay. But as I'll get to, there's always something to play for and prepare for. And that is what we are going to be talking about. So let's get into our review. Let me switch this up. Let me get this on. Let's do some leaves in the background. Why not? Pop this around. We'll take that off. Week 13. Relatively good one. Couple not so good ones. ABG3P, we're 16 and 8. We're hovering right in that 67%. I'd like to be better. One, we lost by a half yard. Hooray. Last week, I talked about, a week ago, I talked about the night games. You could basically go to sleep. This week, every single night game, we're probably, the best 3 games of the week, if not at least 3 of the top 5 from Thursday, Sunday, and last night's game. If this continues, I'm all for it. Worst thing of the week. Worst thing of the week. I was a little down on Nico. Told a couple people to sit Nico. Tank goes out. For some reason, they have I don't know how big he is, 5'10". You look at him in that picture right there in the middle, number 3, probably about 175 pounds soaking wet. You got him blocking and pushing on a goal line surge. Breaks his leg for the most part. Nico goes nuclear. We'll talk about what to do with the Texans from here on out, but I think Nico has to be a must start. We'll see if Stroud can keep it going without his boy Tank Dell. Tank Dell, he after he was picked, he told them, I want Tank Dell on this team. They took Tank Dell. The rest is history. And now for 2023, unfortunately, he's history. The injuries didn't stop there. They just kept going. Ramondre, had injury last night to T-Law. And this has just been how 2023 has been. I mean, every single year we sit and we go over and we analyze and we talk about, and injuries are prevalent. They happen all the time. But this year just seems a little extra. A little extra. Number 10. What in the world was this? What was this? This game? This was absolutely putrid. We'll talk about it when we get further down the list, but Eckler, nothing. Your team kicked 2 field goals. You won 6-0. You threw the ball to Austin Eckler 2 or 3 times. Really? I get that you only have one wide receiver worth a damn, but that's just proof in the pudding. I mean, yeah, you could say the Belichick, they wanted to take out their best player, but Keenan Allen's been their best player. They didn't even target Eckler. The Chargers are something else, man. They are not it. And shame on me for going against myself. I said this a week or two, maybe 2 weeks ago. I said, I am never going to change my mind anymore on a player. I said last season and the season before, I didn't understand what people liked so much. We're into sports cards, what people like so much about Justin Herbert. And going into this preseason, with Kellen Moore coming in, I said, I feel like Justin Herbert's going to win MVP. And Rob looked at me crazy. You can go back and watch the preseason video. When I said that, looked at me cross-eyed, say, "You don't even like the guy." And I go, "I know. I got a weird feeling." Never again. Never again. Number 9, this is still your real MVP. All the talk now is about Brock Purdy being league MVP. No. Debo Samuel was the MVP of that game. This is the MVP of the team. Brock Purdy is doing just fine, but without him, I think they would be just fine. You say, well, they didn't have him last year. They weren't good. They went on a win streak with him. Okay. And then they got their butt kicked in the NFC Championship without him. Okay. But who was their quarterback? If they had a serviceable guy who was as good as Purdy, they'd be just fine. CMC is the real MVP. And at this point in time, he's got to be your consensus number 1 going into next year, I would think. Okay, now I wasn't feeling Joe Flacco, but he looked all right. And when Amari Cooper went down, he kept on feeding his boy Elijah Moore from the Jets. And Mr. Browning, I talked about it when Burrow went down. I said Browning is okay, but last night he was superb. Superb. I think he only had 5 incompletions, and at one point late in the game, only 2 incompletions. Dude looked really good. So your Bengals are not dead. We'll talk about that in a couple slides as well. And him too. And him too. We all love Mr. Minshew from years ago, and he's putting it together now with this team. That game and that game plan was excellent. One of the few teams over the past few weeks, we've talked about it. Tennessee is tough to run on. They're easy to throw on. And so many people went ahead and they played Zach Moss in DFS. They inserted them into their lineups. I had to because I had my top 2 guys on bye in one league. But I didn't like it heading into the week because Tennessee is tough to run on. But the Colts went in with a game plan, said, we'll run enough to run, but we're going to throw. And Minshew handled business. So with all the quarterbacks going down, there's 3 sitting right there who may be out there. Here we go. Pay attention. Let me get this out the screen so you can see. Where are you? There you are. Not really missing much. But we talked about it last week. If you're playing DFS or you're still alive and you got some lineup questions, these are the teams that you want to give a little bit of an edge to. If guys are pretty even or one guy's slightly higher than the other, but maybe on a team who's not so good or not really playing for too much, maybe you give the nod, based on the matchup, especially. We can't forget all that, to somebody on these teams. You say, yeah, there's 16 teams in each conference. Sure. And there's 11 here. So it's almost every team. But as we get going, this is going to become more and more prevalent. Just keep that in mind. Make me eat those words, Mr. Love. 3 really solid wins in a row. I think they won 4 in a row, if I'm not mistaken, but 3 really solid ones in a row. Looked exceptional. You can talk so much about the no call on the defensive pass interference. Sure, it should have been, but it should not have been a late hit when Mahomes was running to the sideline trying to get the first down. So we canceled those 2 out, and here we are. Mahomes had a chance to win the game, threw a ball terribly to Sky Moore. So, they had their chances, but the Packers scored on pretty much almost every possession except for 2. And Jordan Love is looking good. He's making me eat the words. He was terribly inaccurate. He's putting it together, and they're pulling guys in. Wicks starting to look the part. They put Malik Heath in there, Tucker Kraft, who was a five guy for your eye early on, playing for Musgrave. So they're starting to put it together. And listen, it's a bit of a homer comment, and maybe it's a little bit with my heart, but maybe not. The youngest team in the NFL playing like this, with mostly all first and second year guys. Let's keep it going. Number 4, stick with them. They're in trouble because they seem to be a team that, and it's tough because it's a little polarizing because a lot of their games are the like the primetime games, or even if they're a 1 o'clock or 4 o'clock, it's the one that's on TV, so we see it. But they seem to be a team that relies a lot on getting penalties rather than making good plays. Mahomes, best in the league, sure. Ability, creativity, all of that. We've seen it for years. But they're at a point, and I called this in the preseason. Kelsey does not look like he used to. And dynasty leaguers, this offseason's a time to offload him. We'll talk about it in a couple more slides here, but he might be a guy to avoid next year. They got Noah Gray waiting in the wings. They have to draft a stud wide receiver. I love Rashee Rice, but everybody else is worthless. And Mahomes' margin for error is so tiny that a lot of their wins this year and a lot of their chances to win have come down to them relying on getting a penalty called to help them. And they didn't get it. If they would have gotten it, they probably would have beat Green Bay. But I like them next week at home, after that game, at home, playing against Buffalo. I think the Kansas City offense, you have to get the guys into your lineup. I think that they are going to have a nice offensive explosion. I think the Bills coming off the bye, their offense was starting to get it going after they got beat down. I think this one next week between the Bills and the Chiefs is going to be a fantasy bonanza. Something like that we really haven't seen out of KC too much, especially over the last few weeks. You know, when I made this slideshow, so to speak, it didn't come out that what was said was not true. So I'm at the point now where it's like, well, is there even such a thing as Team Zatch? But if it was true, I'm on his team. This dude was drafted in the top 5. I don't remember what it was, 3, 4, somewhere in that range. And they strung him along. They threw him to the wolves on a terrible team. They pulled him. They played Flacco. They played Mike White. They traded for Aaron Rodgers. They said, Zach, you're going to be the backup. Rodgers gets hurt. They put him in. The fans are down on him. Salah says, I'm going to stick with him. All of a sudden, they get to 4-4. They're looking okay. They lose a couple in the row, and all of a sudden, they pull them. A couple people chatted on here, said, Zach is the problem. I say he's not the problem. The offensive line's the problem. Nathaniel Hackett's the problem. Well, Tim Boyle is worse. Probably one of the worst QBs to ever play football based on his 2 games. And they want to go back? I wish that Zach Wilson did say, nah, I don't want to. I don't think so. You strung me along. You put me in. You put me out. The fans, this, that. They don't understand what I'm going through here. It's an incompetent offense. It's a terrible offensive line. I would like to see him go. He's going to go to somebody else. There's no way he stays there next year. And even if he's a backup playing for somebody else, I'd like him to get a chance on a team that has a direction. This whole coaching staff has to go. Listen, I love Aaron Rodgers as a Green Bay Packers fan, but he pulled a LeBron James. I came to the realization he pulled a LeBron James going to the Jets. He brought in all his buddies. Tim Boyle was his buddy, Nathaniel Hackett, and he's strung them all along, all his friends in there, Lazard, Cobb, and it doesn't work. Doesn't work. And Salah is having a fall from grace. Hackett is the problem. I said it weeks ago. A couple of people didn't agree. I think now you see, I don't know a quarterback that you could put in there. If Rodgers comes back, which I saw a report that says he's not going to, but if he does, I don't think that they're going to be much better. The line can't protect anybody. And just one other thing that I heard today after week 13, after 12 games, after week 13, last year the Packers were 4-8 with Rodgers. Jets are 4-8. Do you think that they really would have been much better with the way that this offense is going? I don't know. I don't know if they would have been. I don't know. The defense is certainly better than the Packers defense was last year, but it's not Zach's fault. I don't know if he'll ever get a chance to start on another team, but he's got to get out of New York. I'm sorry, Rob, and anybody else that's Jets fan, but your team doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Number 2, this is the one. We talked about it for a couple weeks now. Dallas, they play really good all the way up until Thanksgiving. And then usually something right after Thanksgiving, and it almost happened Thursday. Seattle kind of kept it close, made it interesting. But this is the one. If Dallas wins this one, then I believe they are an NFC championship team. And Philly's reeling right now. I think Philly might still have the lead in the division, but they will probably lose the 1 seed if they lose this game. But I think Dallas is going to win this one. Not a Dallas fan, relatively anti for the majority of my life. But I think that right now, the way things are going, Dallas could win this one. This is the one. For all the things I've talked about for Dallas going for the past few weeks, they got to win this one. If they win this one, then they're for real. If they don't, then they're just the Cowboys of the 21st century. And here we go. There's always something to prepare for. If you're in the same boat as me, where the majority, if not all of your teams are pretty much eliminated, and even if you don't have a consolation bracket, there's always something to prepare for. At this point in time, even if it's not a dynasty league, at this point in time, you got to start to think about, what did I do wrong? Or do I have any regrets? Or what can I do better or avoid next year? Things along those lines. And then you got to remember those, maybe write them down. So that way, when the summer rolls around, you look back on it and you say, okay, do I still agree with this? Me personally, I have no regrets. I suffered a ridiculous amount of injuries. Name a player who got injured this year, and I would say 75% of the guys that you would name at minimum were on the majority of my teams. And I have no regrets. This was a relatively strange season with guys not performing, guys in good positions too, with youth on their side. It is what it is. So do you regret a decision you made? Write it down so you don't do it again. Start making note of guys that you don't want to touch. A couple guys I didn't want to touch this year: Austin Eckler, Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp mostly because of his injuries. Eckler because I felt like an injury might be coming, plus he's getting old. I think those 2 guys have to be off your list next year. Let somebody else take him. I think Eckler is right at the end. Kupp, you could probably say the same. But there's other guys, and Kelsey was one that I named. Start making note of those guys now. Watch how the season ends. Adjust accordingly. And throughout the last few weeks of the regular season, through the playoffs and the offseason, just pay attention and start preparing, because we saw, I think, one of the most ridiculous fantasy football season. We're not even done with it, but It's been ridiculous, and I'm not sure anybody out there can disagree. Majority of my leagues a week or two ago, you had the top team, maybe the top one or two teams with like three or four losses. Then you had a ton of teams right around 500 just sitting there, 6-6 this past week. It's just like mediocrity. Things aren't crumbling the way they have to. I think one thing that would help us this year, and I don't know if it's going to help us next year, but one thing that would have helped this year is less studs and more guys that are consistent. I feel like a lot of teams had the stud guys, and the stud guys, for the most part, if it was injuries or just goose eggs or close to it, there were a ton of weeks, a ton of games where guys just didn't show up. But then there's guys that maybe weren't even drafted or were drafted late in drafts that every single week are putting up 8, 10, 12 points. And a lot of times they're bench guys, and you just can't stomach yourself to put them in. It's been a ridiculous season. Prepare for it. And I think this season, uh, again, I've been doing this for 20 years, 21 years, and I've never seen anything like this where so many guys misperformed. And I wouldn't say guys come out of nowhere because it always does that, but the guys that should be doing something and the amount of weeks, I mean, every season, maybe 1 week, maybe two at most. I mean, 13 weeks in a season, there's some guys drafted in the first or second round. It's like they took 6 or 7 weeks off. Never seen it before. So we have to prepare for things like that. Draft a well-rounded team. Make sure you get some guys that are consistent. And early in the season, don't be afraid to make moves. A lot of teams, a lot of guys that I know in some leagues drafted some studs in the first couple rounds and traded them for, the less is more, or the more is less, or the more is more. I guess it would be the more is more. And a lot of times people don't like doing a 2-for-1 in the opposite direction. They want to trade two of their bums, so to speak, and get a stud. I feel like this year, the guys that might have survived or are doing a little bit better are the ones that maybe traded one of those big name guys and got two or three smaller guys. And now they have guys to fill the bye weeks. They have consistent players getting them points. It's something I've never seen before. It's like if you go back to the 80s and 90s in gambling. I wasn't old enough to do it, but I've heard stories and I've checked the records. You could put money on the 49ers and the Cowboys. Didn't matter what the spread was. They were covering. You look back the last 15, 20 years, it's not always the case. Sometimes you got to take that underdog. 5 guys for your eyes. Malik Heath, we talked about him for the Packers. Listen, it's getting deep. There's a question coming up in a little bit. Any Hail Marys? I don't think so at this point. We'll address it when we get to it, but it's, you're just trying to fill a roster, fill a bench. Parker Washington, I'll be honest, never heard of him in my life, but we all watched the game last night. Looked pretty darn good. And with Christian Kirk probably out for the season, it's probably going to be one of the top waiver ads because, the majority of leagues I play in are relatively deep. And if it's not a deep league, then you might be able to leave him alone. Maybe not. But he's going to probably fill into that number 2 role for them because I don't count Zay Jones. But he's going to fill into the Kirk role. So then we have Mechie. Well, no Tank Dell. We talked about Xavier Hutchinson. He was a 5 guy for your eye earlier in the season, so I couldn't list him again. So Mechie, we've talked about throughout the season. He's on here. Kylan Granson. It looks like the Colts finally have a tight end that they're going to use. Jelani Woods never played this year. I don't know what happened to him. I didn't think he was this injured. But they're using Kylan Granson. He's relatively consistent. And like I said, Gardner Minshew is slinging the ball. And number 1, my boy from last year, he was my favorite tight end going into the season, could never get it together. Dalton Schultz got injured, and CJ Stroud likes him. and he is basically a wide receiver in a tight end's body. And with Tank Dell going down, I think his play and his targets go up. I think even if Schultz comes back, you might see them turn to a 12 personnel and use both tight ends in there with Nico and maybe a Noah Brown, Robert Woods as the second wide receiver with Mechie and Xavier Hutchinson filling in. So I'm telling you, Brevin Jordan, could we be seeing what I thought in the beginning of 2022? I hope so. I really like the guy. Loved him at Miami in college. And like I said, he's a wide receiver in a tight end's body. And if he can get his feet under him and get some targets, I think we're going to see it over the last 4 weeks of the fantasy football season and hopefully into the playoffs. I've always been a closet Texas fan. It's well known here on Answers My Guess. Questions from the group. Corey Joy said, anyone interested in Tyrion Davis Price? I don't know much about him. Didn't know if he's worth a stash. Well, at first I read this and I was just like, what do you mean is anyone in? You selling him? And then I realized, oh, is any team going to be interested? You don't know much about it. We talked about him a ton in 2022. A ton, Corey. We talked about him an awful lot because it was Elijah Mitchell before Christian McCaffrey got there, and he was always getting hurt. Tyrion Davis Price, TDP, was a rookie last year, came in, we liked him. Then he got hurt. Jordan Mason came in and played some. And then he really wasn't as good. I thought he would be a little better this year, but CMC is just a monster. And then they traded for CMC, and there went Elijah Mitchell, TDP, Jordan Mason. Nobody cared about him. It's an interesting cut. I'm surprised they did that. I'm not really sure why. Mitchell always gets hurt. Jordan Mason, like I said, is sort of underwhelmed, for lack of a better term. And God forbid anything happens to CMC. I mean, you're trading or you're releasing depth. So I guess your question is, would any team be interested? The Packers might be. You know, Aaron Jones has a case of the OLD, just like Austin Eckler. I'm avoiding him next year. Yeah, Dylan looks good. The winter months, Rob and I talked about that about 3-4 weeks ago. That once the weather gets cold, Dylan's probably going to turn it up. He turned it up. He looked pretty good. Patrick Taylor's whatever. Coming out of Kentucky, he's been in the league about 3-4 years now. The Packers might be interested in TDP. I think they might take a shot. Maybe the Titans with Henry a little banged up. I'm sure somebody picks him up. He's on a rookie contract. It's the second year. You won't have to pay much to sign him to your team or your practice squad. I'm sure someone picks him up. If you've got a spot on your bench, pick him up. But you're not going to be able to use him this week. He's not going to help you get in the playoffs. Probably not next week if he gets signed this week. We're talking maybe week 16. If a bunch of things would need to happen. So you grab him if you're in Dynasty. Let's put it that way. And hope he lands somewhere where maybe next year he gets burned because he's got juice. We talked about him a lot in 2022 on this show. We did like him. And the Niners just didn't need him, but I don't think they should have cut him. Timothy Webb says 7 wins in a row for me. Won my division, $100 to go with it. Nice job. He lost Stevenson, Kirk. So there's another one. Maybe the Patriots want TDP. They did get rid of Pierre Strong. Patriots probably is a pretty good call. Would he want to sign with that team? Maybe because he thinks he'll get burned, but that team is terrible. He's got JJ coming back, so we'll see what happens. Second seed locked in. Well, bravo to you. I'm glad, Tim. I'm rooting for you. At least one of us is winning, my man. And please keep us posted as you typically do. Use those hashtags to get us out there. I'm rooting for you, man. I got nothing else to root for. Jeremy, I lost. Well, join the club. Also lost Henry, Puka, and Kirk. You need to win the next 2 weeks. 2 people lose the next 2. You can do it. Any last minute Hail Mary League winners out there? This was what I was alluding to before. Probably not. Unless your league is shallow, then there's probably a bunch. Go to the group, Facebook group, and post your waivers if you want some in depth help about what's there. But if your league is shallow, I'm going to take a stab and say maybe Zeke is available. 8-man, 10-man. I don't play in leagues like that, but 12-man, he's probably rostered. But a 10-man, you might be able to get him. He might be a good Hail Mary. But that team, again, is just so putrid. But take a couple screenshots, post them, and listen, if you're watching the video, Jeremy needs some help. It's not just us. We're a family here. We need you to help him. Anonymous participant. I have to drop one QB. Do I drop Sam Howell or Kyler Murray? They're both on a bye. I looked at the last 3 weeks, and Kyler has one relatively below average matchup. Howell has 2. Howell has better weapons around him, but Kyler has the cheat code with his legs, even though Howell runs. It's tough. I went with drop Sam Howell. If you could keep both and drop somebody else, that would be cool. If not, I mean, well, what QB are you going with this week? I don't know. Some leagues you can only hold 2. So I'm going to say Howell. I don't like it. I'd like to keep both. It sucks that they both have the same bye week. But I'm going to say that Kyler's playing for something. I think Howell's got this job pretty much wrapped up for at least another season. And like I said, he's got 2+ matchups. Howell has 1+ matchup. Drop Howell. Go for the cheat code. And let's just hope that Kyler outscores him over the next 3. I think the first week back, week 15, I think was the week that Howell has a better matchup. But I think the last 2, if I'm not mistaken, had Kyler having a better matchup. So it is what it is. Let's see if there's any comments here. Right. Hey, guys. Hey, what's up? Darko says Kelsey's starting to show his age. He's looking pretty sluggish. That's it, man. And I noticed this a few weeks ago. I kind of mentioned it on here. I mean, there was a point earlier in the season when the whole Taylor Swift, nonsense broke out. And it was like whenever she was in attendance, he would have a good game. It was like he was young again. And when she's not there, he hasn't looked good. She started her world tour. I mentioned it on the show. It was a ABG 3P. It was with Rob. I said, guess what? Her world tour or whatever is starting in 3 days. She's not going to be at any games. And since that point, he has been ultra sluggish. It's just an observation. I don't think it has any correlation unless it's possibly astrological. But yeah, it's towards the end of the line for him. He is a dynasty sell. If the trade deadline has not happened, you do it now. If it has, you just keep quiet. I probably shouldn't even be saying this, but this is how I roll. I put it out there, and if anybody in my dynasty leagues are paying attention, hopefully you turn the volume on because I'm going to be looking to move him. I got Trey McBride as my backup. I'm fine getting rid of Kelsey and getting what I can. But you're right. Yeah, he's starting to show his age. He's taken a beating. He's been a beast his whole career, but he's at the end. And next year, somebody's going to take a name stab way too early. Past couple of years, he's been a first rounder. Somebody takes him in the first round or even the second next year, I think that you go, yes. And you just keep on drafting. Because that's a wasted pick. It's a wasted pick. Lamar the Bum, I don't know what this is in reference to, but he hasn't been too bummy. If we are grading quarterbacks on a scale, they've all kind of been bums this year. I mean, CJ Stroud, I guess. I mean, even Brock Purdy, his numbers are never really great. He's winning. He's got the best team in football. But all quarterbacks are terrible. They're all bums. They're all bums. Um, Jalen Hurts, past couple weeks. I mean, 2 weeks ago he started off super slow. The next thing you know, he had 35 points. But for the most part, quarterbacks terrible. But I don't think Lamar's a bum. Let's see what happens when he comes back from the bye week and plays this week. He hasn't been amazing, but he's been better than most. So that's it. That's what we got. Once again, this is Answers with Guests. We are in season 7, is week 13.5. We're halfway, 2 days away from week 14, halftime adjustments. We'll see. I was talking with Rob, and I see there's still some people watching, so I hope you're listening to this. I was talking with Rob, and during our first 5 seasons, maybe 4 seasons, we were always Sunday morning. And, his kids got a little older. My kids were born. And we get busy and with church and everything else going on and things we have to go to. Sunday mornings became problematic. So we went to Friday night, Saturday night. But one of these weeks, if it's not this week, and Rob, I don't know if you're one of the people watching, if it's not this week, or week 15, 16, 17, we got 4 of them. I think one of them we're going to try and do a Sunday morning, kick it old school, and see how it goes. Because Friday nights are tough. And I notice a lot of us go on and we watch the videos, and we thank you for that as the weekend goes on. And Saturday night, do the same thing. We like the people on live. We like you talking with us and sharing the experience with us. So stay tuned. I'm not sure if it'll be this week, probably not. But one of these last 4, we're going to try and do Sunday morning, old school. So it'll be ABG3P, but it'll be in the morning. And we got merch. You want to buy a hoodie? You want to buy a t-shirt and support us? We got black, we got gray. If you want a different color, I can see what they can do, and I can try and hook you up. We appreciate those of you that subscribe and donate to our Patreon. Buy us a couple cups of coffee. Very much appreciated. And those of you that have purchased a hoodie, we love you for that, and we love you even if you didn't. And we're happy that you're here. Hopefully we're back for season 8. That's what we're striving for. We got 350 almost people on the Facebook page, 7 years going in. This is only our 3rd season with the Facebook group, so it's pretty good starting from scratch. Let's get to 500. Let's get to 500 in that Facebook. And let's get a bunch of people. We got 300 and something people in the Facebook. We should have 300 and something people on the YouTube subscribing, like this guy. Fantasy Football Wizard of Odds, love you. Top waiver claims. It's tough, man. Every league is so subjective. We talk about this week to week. We're heading into week 14. Is there anybody that is really going to save you at this point in time? Depending on league size, I said it to a guy earlier that asked, is there any Hail Mary that might be out there? If you're in a 10-team league, Zeke might be out there. He's probably your best shot at something. If you're playing in a 14 or maybe a deep 12, like I like to play in, and maybe something's going on with your tight end, our number 1 5 guy for your eye this week was Brevin Jordan. He was one of my favorites last year. Heading into this season in 2022, he got injured. Their quarterback situation was terrible with Davis Mills and who the hell else. I don't even remember who they had at quarterback. It was terrible. But now with Stroud and with Dalton Schultz being out, Brevin Jordan is getting playing time, and he's looking the part. It looked like last week he got his legs under him a little more than he did 2 weeks ago, where I made the comment of, hey, he was a little slippery out there. and he's getting targets. And with no Tank Dell there, I think that the Texans might go a couple extra 12 personnel sets if Schultz comes back and get Brevin Jordan the ball some. So that's what I'm sort of looking at. I don't know who needs a tight end. I don't know who needs what, where, how deep your league is, how shallow your league is. But those are two names that I'll throw out there, because if it's not them, or if it's not dude from Jacksonville, who came out of nowhere last night because Kirk is out, I still don't even know his name. I'll go back to the slide here, bring it back. Let's see. I'll give you the five guys for your eyes. Oh, there you go. Parker Washington. That's what it was. Number 4, Parker Washington. This was my five guys for your eyes this week. Fantasy football. Wizard of the Gods. You can't even see it on here. I don't know what the hell's going on. I can't get rid of anything. There it is. So these are the guys. Why? Fantasy football Wizard of Odds. Why are these the five guys for your eyes for week 14, essentially week 13.5? Because I've already given 15 to 20 sets of five guys from July till now. Puka Nacua in the preseason, Tank Dell, all these guys. Kyron Williams was on there in July at number 1 for the NFC West. And I can't duplicate. So this is where I'm at. In the leagues that I play in, I can go on to Fantasy Footballers or ESPN or Yahoo or CBS or any of these guys to get paid to do this, and they're all going to give you the same exact waiver wire guys. And we gave you those guys months ago and told you to put your eyes on them because they're going to do something. I can't double up. This is where we're at. Malik Heath for the Packers, Parker Washington for the Jags, John Mechie, because I already mentioned Xavier Hutchinson way earlier in the year. Those two guys maybe will fill in that Tank Dell role. Kylan Granson, because the Colts are finally using a tight end. Jelani Woods was the tight end for the Colts that I gave earlier in the year. He's been hurt the entire season, and Brevin Jordan was the name that I gave you right there. So that's pretty much where we're at, dude. So top waiver claims, depending on size of league, I can't give you anybody other than what you can get going anywhere else. But if your league is shallow and I had to go off of those lists that everybody else is putting out, Zeke. I think Zeke is the top one right now because Tajay Spears should be owned. Roschon Johnson should be owned. These guys should be owned. And ETN looked fine last night, so forget about D'Ernest. And Tank Bigsby has turned into nothing. So I think it's Zeke. He's a former first-round fantasy running back, a year or two removed, and now he's the number 1. I don't think there's a better pickup at this point in the season. But if you're in a 12-team league, he's probably not available. That's the best I got. Hopefully that helps you, dude. So once again, Answer with Guests, season 7. Hopefully we're back for week 8. Let's get the Facebook up to 500. Share with your friends. Share with your enemies. Share with your league mates. Share with your loved ones. Get us out there, please. Subscribe on YouTube. Patreon subscribers, we love you. T-shirt and hoodie purchasers, we love you. Everybody else, we love you equally. We will catch you Friday night or Saturday night. Please, please come survive with us. We got something to play for. Pride, if nothing else. Have a good night.